Welcome to The Road Less Traveled with Tiffany Rosenbaum. This podcast is about sharing the success and failure of entrepreneurs. Join in and learn from others' mistakes so you don't have to go through the same hardships in business. Now let's welcome your host, business coach, real estate investor, and proud wife and mom, Tiffany Rosenbaum.
Welcome to another episode of The Road Less Traveled. We are so incredibly excited for the guest on today. Sina is coming on, and you talk about a genius in the SaaS world. I'm excited for him to tell you his story. Sina, thank you so much for coming on and talking to entrepreneurs today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor, and also it's been great to get to know you a little bit. In terms of been following you online and listening to all your other podcasts, so hopefully I can live up to the high bars that you've set. But
that won't be hard because literally I've worked inside a few of your companies, and I love what you build and continue to build. So I'm so excited to kind of talk about where you started from. I only know from Propertyware. I don't know from before then. So I don't know if you were in the SaaS world before that, or how did you get your whole entire start?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go that far back, I don't want to date myself. But yes, I did get kind of an interesting start in my career. I graduated from college and I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and there was no tech, which is sad because now it's like full of tech, and I would have loved to have just stayed there. But I left Colorado and moved back to the Bay Area, like right at the beginning of the dot-com bubble, and took a job at Oracle, selling CRM, like when it was like not really even a thing. And it was kind of an interesting ride, working inside of Oracle. And then this guy, Mark Benioff, comes along and he's talking about building, another CRM platform that would compete with, at the time, Oracle and Siebel. And I was totally into it. And so went in and started working for Salesforce as employee 36, I think I was, really early. And just being a part of that journey was incredible. Part of it was just like we were disruptors and coming up with, new ideas that were really bold and ambitious, and working out of apartments and basements of large buildings in SF, and just totally, hacking our way into what we became. So that was a great experience. And somewhere around 2001, my folks have a property management business in Northern California, and they're like, we got this really crappy piece of software. It's been, needs an update. Can you come take a look at it? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And I go take a look at this thing. It's sitting on a Windows machine. And first of all, like, my first thought is like, oh my God, I can't believe you guys are still using software when like the world was starting to shift towards SaaS.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of concerns there because, like, at the time, it's hard to believe, but that was like in the era where, people were still, having desktop computers and backups and power surge supplies and stuff like that to keep their business up and running. But anyways, I was fortunate enough to kind of go through this journey with like learning about property management software, which then kind of launched my career into Propertyware, which was totally accidental, software entrepreneur, but, scratching the itch, which is like a lot of investors like love entrepreneurs. They're like, yeah, they had a real problem, they were solving it. Well, my real problem was my parents had a piece of software that was so archaic that when I went to go look for something better, there was nothing better. And so we started building Propertyware, and that kind of started the whole career. And so lots of really great stories in there, and I'm happy to share all that if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah, no, I would love to hear that. I want to, because it sounds, when we say, hey, I built a software company or whatever, Propertyware, sometimes it sounds so short. How long from the day that you started working with your parents to there was actually a software built that you could use?
Yeah, I mean, these are different times, right? Like back then, building software was a monolithic piece of code that you had to work on for quite some time before anyone could even touch it. Today, you've got people using AI to build stuff that's pretty simple. It was probably about, I would say, 12 months before we started to put people on it. And the initial incarnation of Propertyware is going to sound really silly, but we were getting faxes in the property management office. And my folks
back in the day, I remember those days.
Yeah. I mean, they're like, those work orders coming in as faxes, and they're like, is there a better way to do this? And I'm like, yeah, it's called email. And so we started to work on, a system that would allow people to submit service requests on the web and have it go into a place where, we could manage them. And that was literally the first version of Propertyware. And then it kind of we handed it over to my folks, and they're like, yeah, but we need to know the lease, because if we don't know where they live and, all the terms of the lease, then how do we know what to do? And so then we started building leases and properties. And my co-founder, who I've known since I was 14 years old in high school, was one of the smartest coders I'd ever met. I told him, I'm like, listen, I think there's something here. There's this like really sleepy prop tech industry where they have terrible software, and we should work on this together. And he at the time was getting his MBA at USF in the city here in San Francisco, and his dad was a professor there. And so I'm like, take that finance course and learn how to write accounting software, because we got to write accounting software. So we were like the number one QuickBooks plugin at the time. And my co-founder was learning basically how to write accounting software. And it took us from like from bookend to bookend of starting that project to having it to the point where we were scaling and had our own accounting, probably about 4 years. But, to perfect accounting, man, it took us like 7 to 8 years, because there's just, how it is in property management. There's so many complicated rules to accounting. So we forever were working on it. And I went through some really interesting chapters. Like, we were when we started, there was only a company called Promise out there, which is super old for those of us who've been in the industry for
Yes.
long enough. And so when we started Propertyware, we wrote something on a wall. We were like, build a software company that lasts more than 20 years, eliminate Promise. And so Promise was on-prem software, and we were convincing people to go to the web, which everyone was like, no way, I'm not putting my accounting on the web, which is crazy now. But at the time it was really bold. And so we had to kind of deal with an entrenched competitor with them. But then like, as we started getting some momentum, all of a sudden this little startup called Appfolio shows up, and they were kind of like, flaunting like a search engine, and that was all they really had, and they were trying to build everything else. And so there's a lot of little vignettes of stories of like, what it took to become a competitor against Promise, and then having to fight somebody who was really well funded and kind of surviving those ebbs and flows.
No, I would love to dive into that, because when you got into the market, it was just you and Promise. And then Appfolio came into the market. Was this before you sold Propertyware, or was it was before? Okay.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we bootstrapped Propertyware largely from, kind of my Salesforce, stock that I was slowly selling, and some funding from friends and family. But, it was very scrappy. And there's a whole conversation about being a bootstrap company versus being a venture-backed company. But it was very humbling, because we were building things literally in the back office of a property management office. We were sitting in like the little office in the back of where my folks worked, and listening to what people were saying and doing and building it, and catching up with Promise users. I met a fantastic friend of mine, Melissa Prandy, who was at the time president of NARPM, and I kept asking her and begging her to use my software, and she wouldn't even return my calls. And it turned out like our dads were friends in the Rotary. And so her dad, I guess, guilted her to say, you should at least talk to the poor guy. And so she calls me, and she's like, well, I'm really deep in with Promise. He's a good friend of mine. And so anyways, we convinced her to use it. And that was my first entry into NARPM. It was like 2002. And then we got to know kind of single family property management. That's where we built the bulk of our technology, is working with single family property managers and learning kind of the ins and outs of trust accounting. And just as we started to get to the point where we were competing with Promise and winning, all of a sudden, these guys from Citrix show up and had raised, at the time, it was like 20 million or $40 million. I don't remember, but it felt like a lot of money. And they were going to start another company called Appfolio. And, they had no technology, but they had a technique of trying to like educate the industry. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want to sell anything to you right now, but I just want to like get to know you and be around for, and so they were spending hand over fist, coming into our market. And, we were, really pressed to figure out how to respond to it. And so around 2009, my friend had sold his company to RealPage, a company called Ops Technology, and had convinced me, because they were going to go public the next year. He's like, listen, sell your business to RealPage, come join us. We'll do this together. The outcome will be amazing. And so, after a lot of gut-wrenching conversations, which every entrepreneur goes through, about asking yourself like why you started something, we decided to sell. It was 7 years into the project, and we were poor and young and trying to be relevant. You live in the Bay Area, everyone's like, started something amazing, and like a prop tech guy is not very amazing. And so we ended up selling it to RealPage, and the next year we went public. I got my deal chip behind me and my picture in Times Square ringing the bell on NASDAQ, which was really amazing because like nobody would give me $1 when we were working on Propertyware, and then all of a sudden we were ringing the bell on NASDAQ. So it was like an incredible feeling to feel like, we were onto something, and it worked.
That had to have been an incredible feeling. Now, you said something earlier I want to kind of go back to. You said you have a story or even a lot to say about the difference between being VC-backed versus bootstrapped. I would love to go into that because SaaS is such a big deal right now, and some people are trying to bootstrap companies and some are trying to VC. And in the industry, I can tell the difference between the companies. What is your opinion on this? If someone's looking at building a SaaS company, do you recommend bootstrap versus VC backed?
So I think to answer that question appropriately, I have to kind of talk about two different companies at the same time. So it's strange and humbling to have built two startups in the same industry nearly 20 years apart, right? When I started Propertyware, the big leap was moving from like desktop software to the cloud. Fax machines were still in play. Email was starting to replace paper trails. And then here comes this thing called the iPhone and text messaging and digital payments. And it was all happening really fast. But what I remember the most was how nervous property managers were. They knew change was coming, but it felt really risky. We had to earn their trust by listening, moving fast, and proving that our technology actually worked. And like there were days in the early days where it just didn't work, but we were learning. And we had to empower our team to take really big swings because there was no playbook yet. It didn't exist. There was no like YouTube, and there was no real like LinkedIn where you could just scroll up and down and learn everything you needed to know. So fast forward to Aptly. The dynamics are eerily similar, but the stakes feel higher. The pandemic forced this entire industry to kind of digitize overnight. The competition got smarter, and now we're in the middle of another transformation with AI. But just like before, we're seeing the same patterns, right? Like customers are intrigued to be cautious, but their excitement is also coupled with fear. Will AI replace remote staff? Will automation take the human touch out of property management? These are real questions, but what I've learned is this. Every wave of technology feels uncertain at first until it becomes a new standard. And this is kind of like something I've kind of embraced in my career. Like at Aptly right now, with what I'm working on now, we believe that this wave is AI, automation, and intelligent systems. But like back in those days, it was like moving to the cloud, and it was another thing. But so whether it's 2003 or it's 2025, the formula didn't change. It's just you have to iterate fast, listen harder, and trust your people to lean and lead forward, And so when you talk about like bootstrapping versus like raising a bunch of money, I think there's a really interesting part of this narrative that's really interesting, which is, we started with Aptly with literally a $50,000 investment. I'm sorry, with Property with a $50,000 investment. We couldn't even get any outside money. It was just money we raised from friends and family. And when we went to talk to venture capitalists, they didn't understand what we were doing. And this has kind of been a trend for me in my life, is like, we're always a little bit ahead. It's like, I'm always a little too early. So Propertyware, we were asking people to move their operations to do something they hadn't done before. With Aptly, we were talking about automation and AI before they were doing it. But bootstrapping was really important. And it's something that like, because I've also raised venture money, it's like, you want enough fuel to grow, but you also want the discipline that comes with working with constraints. One of my early mentors at Excel always told me, capital constraints force innovation. And he was totally right. Some of our best product breakthroughs have come when we had no choice but to be scrappy. And so I think like when you have a lot of money, you start to kind of act a little reckless. When you have to kind of work with these constraints, you get super innovative. I mean, if you look at like, even with AI with DeepSeek, like here's this company that comes out of nowhere that can basically build what OpenAI did with, a couple $1 million versus billions of dollars. There's a thread of, some kind of like trend that we can all learn from in there that says like, when we have to be scrappy, we make amazing things happen.
That's true. I do. When your back's up against the wall, there's a difference. Totally different. But if someone was getting into the industry, would you recommend one way or the other?
I think there's a couple things that probably you should add to that storyline, which is it really depends on the idea and what you're working on. When you're working on something that you feel like you're catching up to somebody else that's already there, you you technically want to find a different approach to kind of compete with an entrenched competitor. If you're early to the market, you want to take your time and like let the market understand and educate them on something. I do think that you want enough fuel to get something built that you can start to test and iterate through. That's a really important thing. Is like don't over don't over raise money at the beginning, because sometimes what you'll do is either you will not be forced to have those constraints and go get a product into market and iterate through it really quickly. And that's kind of been part of my culture and leadership style, is like, try to ship something quickly, get in the hands of your customers, get the feedback from them, learn and move on. So I would say I definitely lean towards the bootstrap model, but after you have a little bit of a base to get things going.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, you said you worked with your friend in property. I want to go back to this. You worked with your friend from high school to property.
Mm-hmm.
Is he also still with you in
Yeah.
Aptly?
Yeah, I think that's been one of the things that is also a big part of how I see, just business in general. It's like when you go into starting a new business and you're working on your own, because I've been a solopreneur once too, between my chapters with my current co-founder, Adam Silverthorne. So we started Propertyware together. It was a really amazing journey. And it's like a marriage. Like you, you definitely bicker a lot and you go through those chapters where you hate each other, you love each other, it's good, it's bad, whose job is this? It's not my job, it's your job. And so much like a marriage, it's like the more you can communicate really well and have like some mutual respect for one another, the more you can achieve. And I also think you always want to pair yourself up with people that have complementary strengths and weaknesses. So he's super pragmatic and I push and he pulls back. And so somewhere in the middle, we make that work. But the older we've gotten, the more we've realized that it's really important to work with people that you have some kind of rapport with and that you've worked with for a long time. So at Aptly, I'm super lucky because there's like 5 people on my team that I've worked with for more than 15 years. And so there's this unspoken culture of being able to know that I don't have to tell you more than just a couple of things and you know exactly what you need to do. So that's been really fantastic. Now, the solopreneur chapter for me was really humbling because I realized that, there's so much more pressure on you when you have to do it alone. And there's these times, being an entrepreneur is so hard because like you'll come home and your kids and your family are there and they have no idea what you deal with all day long. And sometimes you bring home that the highs are really highs and the lows are really lows and the stress, and there's no one to share it with because it's just you. And when you have a co-founder that you have that history with, it's like a very wonderful place to share the journey together and reflect on the highs and the lows.
I love that you said that. Now, I like also that you said that y'all argued, you disagreed. There's sometimes you loved each other, sometimes you hated each other.
Yeah.
Now, how did you get through? Because as you grow as an entrepreneur, it's learning that as well. How did you, when you were really upset with your partner, how did y'all decide not to let that break y'all?
I wish there was like a simple answer to that. I think it's partially that I think through all of maybe the highs and lows, we recognize that if we just stuck together for what it took to kind of get to the goal, that we would get there. But if we didn't stick together, then it would never work. I think it's like maybe in both of our minds, and I can't speak for him, but I'm sure he'd probably say the same. In both of our minds, we knew that there were going to be challenges. Like anything that's worth having in life is not easy. And so, we knew the challenges would come, but we had to kind of accept that we would be able to kind of conquer anything together, but we couldn't start attacking ourselves. And it's like being on a professional team. Like I'm a sports person, so I think of it like you can recruit all the best players, but when things go really poorly, if the players start pointing at each other, then it's like the whole team gets kind of almost toxic and it turns into an environment where no one can do their best work. So even though it was my co-founder and I actually see my whole team as kind of founders in our business. And I try not to let people point their fingers at each other. I mean, look, it's natural sometimes when things go really bad and it's obvious that someone was at fault. But we try to say things like, don't ever make the same mistake twice because you want to learn from them and grow. So I think we had this acceptance that we were each going to make some terrible mistakes. And there were some terrible ones. Like there was one on my daughter's first birthday where there was like a catastrophic issue after we'd sold the business to RealPage where like data was lost and had to be retrieved. And he's the coder and I had to go deal with it because I'm the business guy. And I was like cursing him because it was my daughter's first birthday. And I was out there like trying to like make the customer feel like it was okay. But I think what I've found that's really guided us both is like, just be authentic and humble. Like I'm not an ego guy at all. And so we're like that with each other and we're like that with people we meet, like yourself. And when you're super authentic, people see that and they know that you have really good intentions. So I think those good intentions have carried us over the years.
That is true. For the first time, I've known you, but when we sat down to dinner and I just got to listen to you, it was a whole nother, like, okay, like you were really authentic. You can tell when someone's really authentic, and it's really fun to be around people that are authentic because I feel like you can learn a lot. Now, you said something that I'd love to dive into a little bit. How was it when you sold? Because there's a lot of people selling businesses, buying businesses right now. When you sold your business to RealPage, what emotional, mental game did you go through? But also, like, when it happened, what turmoil did y'all go to? Or was it, obviously it wasn't all peachy because you just said there was some hardships, but kind of what did you go through during that?
Oh my God. That's like a whole podcast episode in itself. But let's see, at the highest level, it was like the emotional torture of when someone shows up to your business and says they're interested in buying it. First of all, there's like this really flattering feeling that someone thinks you're onto something, because as an entrepreneur, you always second guess everything you do. And you're like, oh God, what I'm doing is so stupid. It's not differentiated. Everyone else is doing this too. And then there's the clouds part one day and someone shows up and says, no, you're special. And so that feeling is really great. And especially as a person who grinded, and I'm like, I pride myself as being a grinder. Like I will grind through any kind of tough situation. And that's something that's kind of part of our culture. It's been a trend in my career. Like you set a bar, I'll go higher than it. And whatever. And it's like I was a rower in college, and so was my co-founder. So it's like that is a grinder sport. You just have to sit in a boat and you pull as hard as you can, and other people don't have enough and you have a little bit more. And that's kind of entrepreneurialism for me too, in a nutshell. It's like, there's a generation of people who start business that are younger than me who it doesn't work in 2 to 3 years and they just give up because they're like, yeah, it's, the idea was stupid. Anyone who tries to do that in prop tech might as well just walk away right now, because there are no quick wins in this industry. So after like 7 years of doing that and someone shows up and says, I'm interested, your first intention is, oh my gosh, it's finally that day. But I think part of, if I go back and I look at that, it's kind of like both the movie like Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow. It's like you could have got on the train and gone one way, or you missed the train, and it's like these two different paths. One of them she dies and another one she lives. It kind of felt like that because I can see beauty in both paths. Like if I had not sold the business, it would have forced me to grind even longer, and probably the outcome would have been even better, but I would have missed a chapter which was really special, which was like I got to ring the bell on the NASDAQ. I was part of a company that was the first IPO in prop tech, and we did some amazing things together. I got like my MBA basically inside of a large company that taught me so much about how this industry works. I learned multifamily, I learned student housing, affordable, I did it all. And there are no words that can kind of explain it. And the relationships and some of my friends that I met from RealPage, it's like, they talk about like, I have like the Salesforce mafia, all the people like early Salesforce. I also have this RealPage mafia, and like there are some really talented people in there. So for that part of that torture, it was worth it because I got those experiences and they were fantastic. But there was this other chapter of it, which was like a big piece of me died the minute I signed that contract. And there's a friend of mine, Jamie Clymer, who worked with us at RealPage too. I brought him in there, but I remember at the time he was at rentals.com, and we were going to a conference, and I walk in, I'm glowing, I'm so happy. And he looks at me and he's like, savor this moment because every moment after this is going to be worse. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he was right. It was like actually part of the the part of selling a business to another company is like you basically lose control of what you created. It's like it's got your personality on it. It's got your, vision, and it's people are working there because of Tiffany and how charismatic she is and how wonderful you are and the things you do. And then all of a sudden you don't have that ability to do that. No matter what an acquirer says, you become part of like some, whether it's a public company or someone who wants to be public, or a PE company that wants to become, flipped over and flip it to somebody else. Like they have a goal, and it's usually monetary goals, even though they say that they preach culture and whatnot. They have timelines that need to be met. And so like sacrifices start being made, and then they're like little cuts and they keep cutting. And then at some point, you don't even recognize your business anymore. You're like, what is this place? And that was a very painful part of my journey with like, migrating Propertyware into RealPage. Now, RealPage was, I will forever be in debt to them because it was such a wonderful experience for me. But at the same time, I look at that business and I wonder what we could have kept doing if we had gone with it for longer. So, there's that part of it.
There's a double-edged sword to everything we do, right? So I love that you're honest and authentic about it, though. Like there's the experiences you gain, but there's heartache in it too. And what I love that you talked about is a piece of you dies a little bit because you lose the control of it. And it's kind of like the founder's mentality. If there's a book called The Founder's Mentality, and how companies work really well with the founders, but when they sell, it's a whole different ballgame. The culture changes, everything changes. But so now I really do want to go into Aptly because I'm really excited about it actually. But after you sold and after you left Propertyware, why did you decide to start another business? Like what? I mean, you sold, you rang the bell. Why start another business?
So there's one more little chapter in that post-sale piece that you asked about that would kind of segue into this, which was, so I sell this business, and that like holding on to your baby feeling slowly gets kind of replaced with, trying to be part of like a bigger mission and working really well with it. So I transitioned into different roles and started working on different things. But what I recognized about myself was that I really loved being a creator. I loved building things. I feel like I'm a really talented product person. And all of a sudden I was in long meetings all day and doing things I don't love. And that hurt, because I think part of when you sell something or you reach that point in your career where you're like, there's a natural point where you could walk away from it, you have to start asking yourself, like, why did you do this? Now you're going to be asked that question, why are you doing this, when you decide to sell something? If you have that fortunate situation, if you're an entrepreneur, that somebody wants to buy what you're working on, the question will come up like, what's the goal? Now you have to tell an investor what's the goal, because like, you're saying, you give me $1, I'll give you back 10 or 15 or 20. But you have to ask yourself too, because, I don't think I fully knew what my goals were because I was young at the time. And so once I was thrusted into this environment where I was making good money and on a spreadsheet, I should have never left that company. I should have just stayed there until, they went private again and did all those things. In fact, I remember an infamous night sitting at the the table we have in our old kitchen with my wife. Kids were little and sleeping. And I was looking at the spreadsheet and changing the stock price number and looking at the days, when they would all vest. And I just said, I don't care anymore. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't care anymore. It's not the money. I just don't care anymore. And she's like, why? It's like, I'm tired of being miserable. I'm tired of not doing something that matters in my life. I just lost a friend to cancer. I was watching, kind of like this second chapter of your life, because when you're young, you have so much time. You're like, I can just keep doing whatever. It doesn't matter. There's no sense of time. And then you get into your 30s and 40s and you're like, actually time is the scarcest resource. What do I want to do with my time? Do I enjoy just sitting behind a screen all day long with the premise of maybe I'll make, $40 million someday? Or do I want to be living my best life now? And I kept asking myself that question, like, what does my best life now look like? Is it not working? Because I actually tried that. I left RealPage, to your point, and I was like, I'm not going to work. I'm going to just be an advisor and help people. And that was terrible. Like that was easily the worst part of my life, because you give advice and nobody listens to. And then you're like, I still got it. And it's like, I can understand why, like, athletes come back out of being retired, because like in those first couple months or years, you're just like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And so that propelled me to come back and work on Aptly, because like I saw the same things that were happening when we started at Property were surfacing again. And that was kind of like, okay, it's time. We got to do this. And I think the story of Aptly is really cool.
And that's what I want to go into next. I want to go into the Aptly story, because you had a SaaS company, you sold, you worked for the big, and you tried not to work for a little bit, but you're like, no, I got to create. But why Aptly?
So picture this. It's 9:12 a.m. on a Tuesday. You've already answered 4 resident complaints. You've rescheduled vendors, manually forwarded like leads over to your BDR. Your leasing agent just called in sick. The day hasn't even started, and you're already frustrated. And that's where the idea for Aptly was born. We thought, what if property managers had a digital team member that never slept, never called in sick, answered every phone call, and actually learns from every interaction? And that was really the premise of the Aptly platform. It was built to automate the grind. Like, as a lifelong grinder, I'm like, yeah, I like to grind, but why? Like, if we don't have to grind, why not, take a lot of these things like the emails, scheduling tours, follow-ups, rent collection, freeing up my team to be able to focus on what really matters, which is like growing the business and keeping residents and owners happy. But the problem is, like every other company in the world, is like, we can have the intentions that that's what we want to do, but we get distracted with all the minutia and the noise and being in the weeds. So at the core, we wanted Aptly to be an AI powered CRM and automation platform that's specifically built for this property management industry. When we were first starting it, there were people hacking on HubSpot and Monday.com and building things to kind of like make this possible. And we looked at it and we're like, first of all, it's not what it was intended to be for this industry. There needs to be something purpose built that combines communication tools, workflows, smart digital agents to handle everything from leasing to maintenance to renewals. Like, if it was built from day one to do those things, it could be transformative. And that's what we're doing. It's like, we looked at this problem and we realized that we've walked this road before. And, we decided to get a lot of the same people back from the Propertyware team and, take what we had done with like the first cloud-based property management system and take it even further. And what we really want to do is really kind of modernize how property management thinks about scaling their operations, giving, not just because there's a lot of point solutions out there today. Like, I appreciate how hard it must be for this industry to like look at like, oh, that's a cool tool. That's a cool tool. And it's like, you're all of a sudden like 15 tools into it and you're like, whoa, like it's so hard to just get my job done. And what really drove us was trying to build a place where work gets done. It's like a modern operating system for property management where people can be intelligent, proactive, and things get automated. And it's really built for what's next. And we saw this opportunity because all the tech was all lined up. And so I'm like, I just can't sit on the sidelines for this one. I got to get back in again.
That's awesome. No, because I don't know if you know, but for the last 2 years, I've been interviewing softwares, and I don't make changes when it comes to softwares very easily, because it's just your whole team gets a little bit anxious. I get anxious because, you don't want to lose owners. You don't want to lose residents. Yep. You want to make sure it's smooth. But with the software we're on, it's not really an open API. It's just it's a little older. And so as we really dove in, we decided to make the switch. And one of the biggest things about the switch was Aptly. And like, how can we create this intuitive system where we're not bogged down with the follow-up. We're not bogged down with the little bitty things. Instead, this can help us grow and become more efficient and help our team because I think a study I read was property management has a 33% higher turnover rate in team members than any other sector. And normally it's because the team's bogged down with the little minutia items that every day have to come in and get, every day have to come and do. And so I love what y'all are doing, and the efficiency that it's going to do for companies is amazing. But as you started Aptly, what is like some of the pitfalls that y'all have gone through, and what are some things that y'all are doing to change the industry?
So I think going back to like how we started the company. We started it as an AI inbox, pre-open AI, which was really hard to do because it was like we're building something that was not ready to be built yet. And through building that inbox, we spent a lot of time and money just like, you don't appreciate how complicated email is. Like it's supposed to just work until you want to like build email software and you're like, wow, it's really quite complicated. So we spent years iterating through, the inbox, but it taught us a lot about how important communication is for the fundamentals of every business. It's so important for internal excellence. It's really important for customer excellence, and it just drives better outcomes. So we knew if we could just be the very best inbox for this industry, then that would open up a lot of doors for us. Now, that's not an easy thing to do, and it's like an ongoing endeavor to continue to raise that bar. And I think that's part of like what separates us from a lot of the industry is that we're product first always. Like we're always innovating. We always want to kind of have the latest and greatest of this and that, almost to a fault, because like, there are other companies that will just like build something and just like try to sell as much of it as possible. We're kind of the opposite. We're always kind of observing and understanding what's happening around us. And so, some of the innovations that we introduced through the process of building the inbox, and we realized AI wasn't ready, we're like, well, but all these communications are triggering some kind of workflow. And those workflows were pretty easy to kind of predict what they were. There's like 12 to 15 of them that happen all the time in our lives every day. And so to your point, like if we could just take that burden off of, the employee that has to kind of constantly be on the lookout for that email and have to do things manually. And a lot of these other systems that were our predecessors still force you to go back to the inbox and be like, oh, see, this thing happened. Let me go back now and update this. And that was where we're like, okay, that should never have to happen. And so that was the first incarnation of like what kind of drove us to build what we wanted to do, which was like, can we connect your communication to how work gets to be done and then take all these little minutia tasks off your shoulder. But then this other magical thing happens along the way, which is like we started to recognize that, to your point, a lot of these ecosystems were closed. They just don't like let you have your data. So we're like, well, why not just bring all their data into Aptly and allow people to design whatever they want? And I think that's what separates the Aptly story from other narratives that are out there. It's like all your data is coming in from your property management software. You don't have to be a coder. You can kind of manipulate it, do what you want to do with it, and kind of geek out on seeing the stats and like building the processes. And so there are very different people in this industry. There's some people who love that and just want to be like, I want it all. I want to play with it all. I want to design it all. Then there's some people who are like, no, I don't want that. I just want it to just, do some very simple things for us. And that's where we've kind of like been working really hard in the last couple of years, is to have a methodology that brings something to the table for people who don't have the resources and time to build out things, but also cater to the builders in the world who want to use platforms like Aptly to give them a huge competitive advantage. And we're at a place right now, by the way, where we went from triggers and automations and this and that to straight up AI. I mean, I know you appreciate this, where you can just be like, that call that person was supposed to be making, let's just have AI do it. And it's pretty good. Like, and it's going to become the standard soon. And right now, those people who are embracing it, they're going to figure out the right blend of where AI should do it versus where humans should do it. But the net outcome of it is that you're going to have happier employees and less churn and better results.
100%. I love that. I think it is going to become the norm. Like, and I think an easy place to start is with the residents. Test the AI, make sure it's developed, and then bring it all full force. We are big on innovation. I think that's important in business. I think that's the only way to really survive in this type of industry that's changing so rapidly. Like I feel like it's overnight. I know it's not overnight, but it is changing so rapidly.
Oh, totally. Yeah, 100%.
It's crazy. But Sina, I love what you're doing. What is like some advice you could give to the entrepreneurs that are watching? They're going through this journey of the roller coaster. What is some advice you can give them?
I mean, I'll give you two answers to that. I'll give you kind of the advice is like, if you're a leader listening to this, kind of how I see leadership, and then kind of where I see it from a product side. Because as a leader, I've always known I wanted to be a leader, just like I knew I wanted to be a dad and a teacher. That's the checkbox I haven't got to yet, but I will someday. I actually I'm an adjunct professor on my spare time, which is basically like slave labor. They don't pay you and you teach a class, but it's still amazing for me.
I love that you said your spare time. I know good and well
Because I
running a
don't have
SaaS
that
company,
much.
you do not
Right.
have spare time.
You do podcasts, I do teaching.
Yeah, I love it.
So for me, leadership it isn't about being in charge. It's about helping people become the best version of themselves. And that's what the best parents do. It's what the best coaches do. It's what the best mentors do. They see potential even when other people can't see it, and they nurture it with patience and not pressure. And that's how I like to lead. I care really deeply about the people who work for me. I want them to feel challenged, supported, and proud of what they're building. And I want them to do that best work here at Aptly, not because they're micromanaged, but because they feel inspired. And that's something that drives amazing outcomes in businesses. And that only really happens when you have a culture where every voice is heard, and you tell people like, hey, take risks, be bold, but don't make the same mistake twice. Just try to fail forward if you can. And at Aptly, I feel like that's helped us build a culture of innovation, passion, and humility, because there's really no egos here. Everyone's opinion matters, and we try to move fast and iterate with our eyes and ears open. And I think that ability to listen, has helped us kind of screen the right people, like people who are very capable of listening and being able to synthesize information and do the right thing with it. So, for young entrepreneurs or anyone who's starting a SaaS company or even a property management company, it's really important to have this culture of iteration. So ship, learn, improve, and just kind of get rid of this mythical version of done and just focus on just kind of constantly getting things out there. And I think that mindset really helps any business get an edge, because at the end of the day, it's really important to just kind of learn as quickly as you can. And to that regard, there's another really key thing, which is really important, which is I think you really have to have command over your numbers, especially in this world. I think things have changed. Like back in the days of property where we could buy a lead off Google AdWords for 50 cents. And that was you, and I'd call you up and you would answer the phone. And it was so easy. There was no ads in front of you. There was no spammy emails that came in your inbox every day. So I think right now, after getting this front row seat into what it took to grow a software company the right way in Propertyware and trying to carry over those lessons into Aptly, I realized that, fundamentally there's some really key metrics that every property management company, because property management companies are a lot like SaaS businesses. There's some very similar fundamentals. Both depend on acquisition, retention, and customer outcomes. So the KPIs we track at Aptly are kind of the same reflective DNA that you probably have in your business. So, whether it's cost of customer acquisition, average revenue per account, churn, lifespan, LTV, payback months, we kind of know our numbers. And it's not that we just know our numbers, it becomes part of our culture, because these aren't just vanity metrics. They're the metrics that drive real decisions, real accountability. And it's how we structure our teams. So even our customer success teams, their compensation is directly connected to our customers' outcomes too. So we use these KPIs to not only just measure performance, but also to motivate it, right? So our clients are growing and they want, quick answers, and they want some people to kind of be on their side and help them through the journey. Our ratio of CS people for customers is probably too high, but that's okay with me, because I feel like it's going to pay us back in long-term value of customer. So we've also, we try to innovate here, and we built our own health scores to basically look at exactly what is a healthy customer? What does that person look like in terms of using our product, but also in the outcomes that you came to me with when I talked to you? And how do we align on these things and make sure that they're there? So we have those kind of built into a health score that everyone kind of pays attention to and obsesses with. And just like you guys, there's some customers that are really not a good fit for you. And you're like, hey, it's probably me, not you. You should go find another place to manage your business. And I think that's really important. It's if you know your metrics and you have a company where everyone understands the vision and we're all aligned and you're encouraging people to do their best work, pretty magical stuff happens. And it takes time. Again, this is the whole grind thing. If I was any other business, I probably would have quit in the first 5 years, but now we're 8 years into it. And people actually finally are oh, I've heard of you. That's great. Oh my God, my friend says wonderful things about you. And that's the reward.
I love that you said key metrics, because what's measured can grow. And like, if you don't know your numbers and if you're not talking about your numbers and it's not part of your culture, how are you supposed to use those to make the decision to get to the next level? Because either you're growing or you're dying, I feel, in business. You're not staying the same, because you're not going to have a customer for ever and ever and ever. Someone's going to pass away, something's going to happen. So either you're growing or dying. I love that. What is a book that you would recommend to our viewers to help them in this journey?
So I'm going to give you some not traditional things.
Ooh, I like that. I like it. I like non-traditional things.
So I read the book The Alchemist when I had just left Salesforce, when I just left Propertyware, and kind of changed my life. First of all, like, if you're not a reader, you can get the Jeremy Irons version on Audible. It's amazing. And I won't ruin it for you, but it's like a really, really great story, and it's super short, and it just kind of aligns with everything that I feel like when you know where your heart is and why you're doing things, and you're really authentic, and you're like, I don't know, you have teenagers, right? And teenagers are really tough, right? Because they're just like, they're so uncomfortable with themselves. They just can't just be themselves in their own skins. But like, I think that's part of the human journey, is like to first accept who you are, and like humbly kind of understand like what your goal and vision is in life, and then just go do it and just accept, the journey for what it is. And that is the book, The Alchemist. It is really fantastic for those reasons. So I've very much enjoyed reading that book. Other books I think that have been pivotal for me in kind of understanding, any type of books that have to do with like the customer journey and understanding kind of like, what it takes to be like really good at building product. Art of the Start was one that Guy Kawasaki is like one of the first ones I read a long time ago. I mean, I keep almost 100 of these books like kind of around me on my shelf. So like, yeah. And every week I kind of bring, a different one off my shelf, and I put it strategically behind my Zoom calls here. So right now I have the Tipping Point and Presence.
I like it.
I think in general, I'm always obsessed with seeing how people kind of like get ahead of a curve, and kind of they position their businesses in the right place at the right time. But I also think it's really important to not always read business books. So I'm going to give you another not business book for you, which is another one called Mental Toughness Mantras by Chris Dorris. Probably one of my favorite books, because it's all about how to be mentally tough. And I think that's the part of being an entrepreneur, is like knowing why you're doing it and being super mentally tough. And so it's a great book. It's probably another very short read, and it's just a bunch of mantras. And after you start to read it and then really live it, you start to see some transformation, because when you're that person who's super positive and you always come into challenges and see them as opportunities, then it's like people around you are like, God, that guy is just like, he's just different. And that's kind of like what if there's a narrative I want about me, is like, Sina is different. It's just not, he's a totally different type of guy. And that's what I want to be labeled as.
100%. I love that. Mental toughness is so important in entrepreneurship. So important. All right. What is the worst advice you've ever received?
Oh my gosh.
I know.
There's so many of them. Like, there's financial ones, like sell a stock when you shouldn't. I remember, this is a pretty good one actually. One of my friends, because when you leave a company, like, first of all, you know too much about a company, and someone will be like, this place is a total mess. You should get rid of their shares, or just leave the company. And I think part of like a younger version of me was to like listen to people without actually making the assessment of the situation myself, because it's so easy. You're so busy, and you're like, okay, Tiffany said that company's the worst company in the world, so I'm just going to assume they're the worst company in the world, versus like being so like intelligent that you're like, okay, that's one person's opinion, and I'm going to now use that to go be curious and go look and try to make my own assessment. And there's been some times where like I just dumped a stock because I thought it was like, they just lost this executive, they're going to hell, and then they churn 4 great quarters, and I missed out on a lot of great earnings that I could have had. So I think that's, bad advice is like always to just assume that someone's assessment of a situation is gospel, and then you just follow it. That would be one big area. Another one is I mean, my team would describe me as like overly cautious. So I like to, because of past experiences where I just kind of jumped in, like when you're young, you just kind of jump into things. You're like, yes, let's do it. And then it takes like a lawsuit or something like that. And then you're like, whoa, okay, I don't want to jump in anymore. I want to be smart about things. And so, like, bad advice I've taken would be like things where, we jumped into a business model or jumped into working on a product and then didn't really think it through 100% because we wanted to be first so badly that we didn't really consider what the potential risks are. So the older, wiser version of me says, and I'm married to an attorney and I have a lot of attorneys in my family, is just spend the money to research an idea or a move to a market or buying a business. Like, you just want to take a little bit of time. There's a saying of, move slow to go fast. And it's so accurate because I think majority of the time in my life when I moved fast, it was only to then be slowed down later. So I would rather, go slow first before I go fast.
Oh, I like that one. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Um, Gosh, I mean, I would probably say that the book is out on that one on a couple of them that are still kind of like baking, but I would say the narrative on my best advice now, I mean, you ask that question different times of your life, you give different answers. I think right now it would be like, um, I think it's to do everything with humility and to really be intentional. I think the older you get and you slow down a little bit and you're like, our lives move so fast so often that it's to be super present and just to like really kind of live like this day, like it might be your last, is super important. I'm pushing 51 now, which is, like you get to that point in your life where you're like, start to see your parents as like this terrible feeling where you raise kids and you kind of get married, you do all the things, and then you're dealing with like aging parents and it's not all good news like it used to be. And so like now I feel like the best advice I've taken from many, many people is like take care of yourself, make sure that you're living your best life every day and be super present, whether it's sitting here talking to you, like I'm not looking at my phone. I don't care about what's going on in the world. I just want to be right here, right now, and try to observe and get the most out of it. Because I do believe that this is one of the most beautiful parts about life is just like what you learn and the experiences you have. I have a mother with Alzheimer's, and like when I see that all robbed from her where she can't remember any of it, it's like the most traumatic thing I can think of because like we are no richer than the connections we build with people and the experiences we have in this life. The money will come and go, but the experiences will never fade.
That is so true. I love that you put it like that because, you got to live your life and be very intentional. And when we sat down to dinner, I really noticed that. Like, you were, like, really in everything we were talking about. There was no phone out. There was no trying to figure out who was trying to need you or get a hold of you. And it was very, that conversation felt like the most important thing to you. And not everybody has that quality. I think everybody needs to work on that quality. That's something I have to work on heavily. Because I can jump really easy if I'm not careful. But I appreciate that. I love all the advice you've given.
Well, how about I turn it back on you? What is the best advice you've gotten? Just because I'm curious.
Oh.
Because you interview so many great people,
The best advice I have ever received so far is
or at least one of them.
When I was a little kid, my dad turned to me and he said, "Tiff, you can do anything you want as long as you're willing to work for it." And I realize that's true. Like, at the end of the day, like you talk about grinding, like I will grind, I will work harder. I mean, I've played basketball with a broken arm, a ankle messed up. It was like, at the end of the day, it's a choice, right? And I realized if I want something, I can have anything, and the only thing that stops us is our own roadblocks that we put in front of our own legs. So
I think one of the things that I gained from spending a little bit of time with you has been just as a father of a daughter, like I'm always so excited to see really successful women who are driven like that because that is what I want for my daughter, just to like know that there is no ceiling above your head, that you can go get whatever you want. And that can be anything. Like, I feel like sometimes I pressure people around me to be an entrepreneur because that's my journey. And I'm learning to be better at being like, no, whatever it is you want to do it, but just like do it with all your heart. And it's very obvious because like you're one of those people that when you're around you, you can kind of sense the excitement and passion. It's like, there are definitely people in this world that you just come around them and you leave and you're like, whoa, I feel so excited. I want to go do stuff now. And you're definitely one of them. And I think that's fantastic because you'll spark and kind of like create a whole nother group of people below you that are following this journey. And you start to see that. I saw that with my journey. It's like people were like, they send you emails, ask you questions, and then you see them go do their thing. And you're like, that's awesome, dude. If I gave you just a teeny spark to do that, it fills my cup so full. It's unbelievable.
So true. Thank you so much. Sina, I have so much respect for you. I appreciate you coming on today and literally just talking to us and being so authentic and telling us the ups and the downs of the roller coaster. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And hopefully we'll be able to connect in the real world here soon.
100%. Now, if people want to connect with you and find out more about Aptly or the companies that you're doing, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me online, obviously, at getaptly.com, but you can also hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm pretty good about responding on there as well. We're out in the world. And, it's funny because it's like what we do is not glamorous, as you know. It's like it's between all the grinding that we get these like moments where you can kind of sit down and like slow down and enjoy life. So we're out on the road. If you ever want to hit me up, I'm at Sina@getaptly.com. And just, I've been very good about paying it forward for people who just want some advice. And so I'm always happy to answer.
I can definitely attest to that. You are that person. So we really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Tiffany.
Thanks for tuning in today to The Road Less Traveled. If you're organizing an event, workshop, or simply planning something exciting and would like to have Tiffany Rosenbaum join you or want to have her on your podcast, visit TiffanyMRosenbaum.com and click on Book Tiffany to get started.